4:17 in the afternoon on a cloudy Tuesday in Oakland. Steph Curry was driving his discreet Tesla back from practice when something he saw at the corner of 14th Street made him slow down until he stopped completely. A young woman was sitting on the sidewalk, hugging her knees, crying with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. In her trembling hands, an opened envelope with the unmistakable red letterhead of an eviction notice. To understand how a casual 3-minute encounter changed two lives forever, we need to go back to the moment when compassion met despair and decided it couldn't simply drive past. Sarah Martinez, at 28 years old, had just received the worst news of a life that had already been tested beyond limits. 48 hours. That was the time she had to find $1,200 in back rent or leave the small two-bedroom apartment she had called home for 3 years. Have you ever felt so lost that the world around you seemed to crumble in slow motion? Sarah was living exactly that moment, holding a letter that represented not just eviction, but the real possibility of being on the streets with 2 small children. Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise, her late grandmother used to say. But in that moment, sitting on the cold sidewalk of Oakland, Sarah felt she had reached the limit of how many times a person can rise. Steph Curry parked the car a few meters away and observed for a moment. 20 years of public life had taught him to be careful with spontaneous approaches, but there was something in that woman's posture, a genuine vulnerability mixed with a dignity that refused to be broken, that touched something deep in his soul. It was impossible not to remember his own mother, Sonia, during the most difficult moments of childhood, when Dell was traveling and she was raising Steph and Seth practically alone. There were nights when he would find her crying in the kitchen, trying to make accounts that simply wouldn't balance. Curry got out of the car and walked slowly toward Sarah, each step weighing with the uncertainty of how to approach someone in such an intimate moment of pain. "Excuse me," he said softly, stopping at a respectful distance. "Is everything okay?" Sarah lifted her face, and Curry could see she was even younger than she had appeared from afar. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was a natural beauty that not even despair could completely hide. "Sorry," she said quickly, wiping away tears and trying to compose herself. "I didn't want to be bothering anyone out here." How is it possible for someone to apologize for going through the worst moment of their life? Sarah was demonstrating the kind of politeness and consideration that comes from a genuinely good soul, even in devastating circumstances. "You're not bothering anyone," Curry replied, sitting down on the sidewalk next to her, a gesture that surprised her with its simplicity and humanity. Sometimes we all need a moment to process difficult things. Sarah looked at him more carefully for the first time, but showed no recognition. She was obviously too absorbed in her own crisis to process that she was talking to one of Oakland's most famous people. "It's just that," she began, then hesitated, clearly torn between the impulse to open up to a kind stranger and the instinct to maintain privacy about personal problems. "You don't need to explain anything," Curry said gently. "But if you want to talk, I have time to listen." What's most impressive is how small gestures of humanity can open emotional floodgates that someone was trying to keep closed. Curry's simple words broke Sarah's last barrier. "I lost my job 6 weeks ago," she said, her voice coming out in a whisper heavy with shame. "I'm a nurse. I was a nurse at Oakland General. They cut 40% of the staff because of budget restructuring." Curry nodded, encouraging her to continue without pressuring her. "I have 2 small children," Sarah continued, the words coming out more quickly now, as if a dam had burst. Emma is 7 years old, Diego 4. Their grandparents, my parents, died in a car accident 2 years ago. My husband, their father, died of cancer 6 months later. Curry felt something tighten in his chest. One tragedy after another, accumulated on a person who clearly didn't deserve such weight. I used all our savings on his treatment, Sarah continued, tears beginning to flow down her face again. I sold everything that had value, and it still wasn't enough to save him. Naturally, this brings us to the moment when Steph Curry understood that he was facing not just someone in temporary crisis, but a mother fighting heroically to keep her family together against impossible odds. And now, Sarah held the eviction notice with trembling hands, I have 48 hours to find $1,200 or, I don't know, where we're going to sleep. The vulnerability in her voice broke Curry's heart. Here was a woman who had lost almost everything, but still fought with a determination he recognized. It was the same determination he had seen in his own mother during the most difficult moments. "What's your name?" Curry asked softly. "Sarah. Sarah Martinez." "Sarah, my name is Steph," he replied, choosing not to mention his last name yet. "And can I ask you a question? Where are your children now?" "Upstairs." Sarah pointed to a second-floor window of the modest building behind them. "Emma is taking care of Diego. She's had to grow up very fast since we lost their father." Curry looked at the window and could see two small silhouettes watching through the curtain. Even from afar, it was possible to perceive they were worried children, trying to understand why their mother was crying on the sidewalk. "Do they know about the eviction?" Curry asked. "Emma knows," Sarah admitted. "It's impossible to hide this kind of thing from an intelligent girl. She asked me this morning if we were going to have to sleep in the car." The image of two small children asking if they would have to sleep in the car hit Curry with a force that surprised him. He had his own daughters, Ryan and Riley, and couldn't imagine having to explain to them that the family might be homeless. How many times do we judge our own situation as difficult until we encounter someone facing truly devastating circumstances? Curry was having a moment of perspective that would change his understanding about privilege, gratitude, and responsibility. "Sarah," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I would like to help, if you'll allow me." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" "Because everyone deserves a chance," Curry replied simply. "And because I have the feeling that you're not asking for help out of pride, but out of love for your children." It was possible to perceive that Sarah was fighting internally between the desperation that would lead her to accept help from any source and the dignity that made her hesitate to accept charity from a stranger. "I can't accept money from you," she said finally. "You don't know me, don't know if I'm trustworthy or—" "Sarah," Curry interrupted her gently, "you just told me your most painful story, because I asked if I could help. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." At that moment, the building door opened and two small children came running out. Emma, a girl with brown hair and intelligent eyes that seemed too big for her face, followed by Diego, a little boy with dark curls and a worn teddy bear in his arms. "Mommy!" Diego shouted, running to Sarah and throwing himself into her arms. "Why are you crying out here?" Sarah hugged her son, trying to hide her tears, but Emma, older and more perceptive, looked at Curry with curiosity and protection. It was clear she had learned to be suspicious of strangers when it came to protecting her family. "Who are you?" Emma asked Curry directly, positioning herself between him and her mother in a way that demonstrated impressive maturity for her 7 years. "My name is Steph," Curry replied, admiring the girl's courage. "I was just talking with your mother." "Mommy," Diego said, looking around with confusion. "Where are we going to sleep today? The lady from the office said we have to leave." Diego's innocent comment completely broke Sarah's heart. She broke down in tears again, hugging both children with a desperation that Curry felt physically. "Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise," he murmured, but this time not to himself. It was for Sarah, and for the 2 children who deserved to see their mother rise once more. Curry looked at Emma, then at Diego, then at Sarah, and made a decision that would change all their lives. But what he decided to do would change everything forever. Steph Curry looked at Diego, who was still holding his worn teddy bear and waiting for an answer about where to sleep, and felt something break inside his chest. Not anger or sadness, but an iron determination that he recognized from his most competitive days on the court. "Sarah," he said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute? In private?" Sarah nodded, asking Emma to take care of her younger brother for a few moments. They walked a few steps away from the children, but still within their line of sight. "I want to help," Curry said directly, "but I need you to know that I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an opportunity. Have you ever encountered someone who insists on maintaining dignity even when they're desperate?" Sarah Martinez was demonstrating exactly that kind of character strength that Curry recognized and deeply admired. "I can't accept money," Sarah repeated, but there was a hesitation in her voice that revealed the internal conflict between pride and desperate need. "You don't know me. You don't know if I'm a good person, if I'm trustworthy." "Sarah," Curry interrupted her gently, "in the last 10 minutes, you told me about losing your parents, your husband, your job, and being about to lose your home. But the first thing you did when your children came out was hug them and try to hide your tears to protect them from your own pain. That tells me everything about who you are." It was impossible not to notice how Curry's observation hit Sarah. No one had recognized her maternal strength in a long time. She was so accustomed to feeling like a failure that she forgot she was still an extraordinary mother, fighting in impossible circumstances. "Besides," Curry continued, "I have a confession to make. I'm not just Steph. I'm Steph Curry." Sarah looked at him with confusion for a moment, then her eyes widened in recognition. The basketball player?" "The basketball player," Curry confirmed with a gentle smile. "And before you get intimidated or start feeling embarrassed, let me tell you why this matters. How is it possible for someone to use fame as a tool to connect instead of intimidate?" Curry was demonstrating a humility that transformed privilege into a bridge of understanding. "My mother raised me alone for long periods when I was a child," Curry explained. "My father traveled a lot, and there were nights I would find her crying in the kitchen, trying to make accounts that wouldn't balance, worried about how to put food on the table." Sarah listened in silence, clearly processing the vulnerability that Curry was sharing. "She always said, 'Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise,'" Curry continued, "and seeing you here, fighting for your children after losing so much, you remind me of her. You remind me of the strength I admire most in the world." Naturally, this brings us to the moment when Sarah understood that she wasn't being seen as an object of pity, but as an example of admirable strength. "So, when I offer help," Curry continued, "it's not because I feel sorry for you. It's because I recognize a warrior mother who deserves a chance to rise once more." Tears returned to Sarah's eyes But these were different, not of despair, but of gratitude for being seen and valued for who she really was. "But I still can't just accept money," she insisted. "I need to maintain my dignity for my children." "What if it wasn't money?" Curry asked. "What if it was a job opportunity?" Sarah's eyes lit up slightly. "What kind of opportunity?" "I have contacts in the Bay Area hospital system," Curry explained. "Qualified nurses are always in demand. I can make some calls, arrange interviews, but that will take a few weeks, and you need a place to stay tonight." What's most impressive is how True Solution always honors the dignity of the person being helped. Curry was offering not just immediate relief, but a path to sustainable independence. "So, here's my proposal," Curry continued. "I have a guest house that stays empty most of the time. You could stay there temporarily, not as charity, but as a work arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Sarah asked, clearly interested but cautious. "You would take care of the main house when I'm traveling, prepare some meals. Basically, do things I normally pay other people to do. In exchange, you have a safe place to stay while you find permanent work." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer. It was possible to feel that she was weighing pride against practical necessity, dignity against desperation. This would really be work?" she asked finally. "Not disguised charity?" "Sarah," Curry said with absolute sincerity, "I have two small daughters, Ryan and Riley. If something happened to me and Isha, and they were in the situation you're in now, I would pray that someone would offer my wife exactly what I'm offering you." The emotional honesty in Curry's voice broke Sarah's last resistance. She could hear that he wasn't being condescending or playing savior. He was being a father who understood what it meant to protect children. "Emma! Diego!" Sarah called the children, who immediately ran to her. "What is it, Mommy?" Emma asked, clearly trying to read the expression on her mother's face. How many times do children develop hypersensitive emotional antennas because they've had to worry about adults from a very young age? Emma was demonstrating exactly that premature maturity, and it broke Curry's heart to see it. "Children," Sarah knelt down to be at their height. "Mr. Steph has offered us a place to stay while Mommy finds a new job. What do you think?" Diego looked at Curry with curiosity. "Do you have toys at your house?" Curry laughed, the first genuine laugh he had had since stopping the car. "I have two small daughters, so yes, we definitely have toys." "And video games?" Emma asked, trying to maintain an air of disinterest, but completely failing to hide her hope. "Emma!" Sarah gently reprimanded her. "It's okay," Curry smiled. "And yes, we have video games. But first, you would have to help me convince your mother that this is a good idea." Emma looked between Curry and Sarah with the seriousness of a 7-year-old lawyer. "Mommy, do you trust him?" The simple question from a child cut straight to the center of the issue. Sarah looked into Curry's eyes, not of the famous athlete, but of the man who had stopped his car because he saw someone suffering. "Yes," she said simply. "I trust him." "Then can we accept?" Diego asked, hugging his teddy bear tighter. "I'm tired of being worried." The brutal honesty of a 4-year-old about being tired of being worried hit both Sarah and Curry like a punch in the stomach. No child should have to carry worry about basic security. "We can accept," Sarah said, tears of relief running down her face. "We can accept Mr. Steph's help." Diego shouted with joy and ran to hug Curry's legs, who was surprised but touched by the spontaneous gesture of trust. Emma was more reserved, but extended her hand to Curry formally. "Thank you for helping our family," she said, with a dignity that reminded him exactly of her mother. It was possible to perceive that Curry was being transformed by the experience as much as Sarah. He had started the day as a professional athlete returning from practice, and now was becoming an extended parental figure for a family that desperately needed stability. "Sarah," he said, "let's get your things and take you home. And tomorrow, we'll start building a better future for your family." "Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise," Sarah murmured, repeating the words that Curry had shared. "And today, we rise together." Curry smiled, realizing he had found not just a family to help, but a lesson about community, compassion, and how to use privilege to create real opportunity. No one could imagine that moment would be the turning point. 2 hours later, Sarah Martinez was standing at the door of a guest house that was larger and more luxurious than any place she had ever lived. Emma and Diego were exploring the rooms with a mixture of admiration and disbelief, as if they were in a dream from which they might wake at any moment. "Mommy, look!" Diego shouted from the children's room. "There's a bunk bed and even a television." "And there's a desk where I can do my homework," Emma added, her premature maturity manifesting even in moments of joy. Have you ever experienced that surreal moment when your life changes so drastically that your brain struggles to process the new reality? Sarah was living exactly that, holding the keys to a house that Steph Curry had handed her as if they were the keys to paradise. "Sarah," Curry said softly, appearing at the door with grocery bags, "I thought you might be hungry. I brought some basic things to get you started." "Steph, you didn't need to," Sarah began, but he interrupted her with a gentle smile. "Remember our agreement? You're going to take care of the house and prepare some meals. Consider this your first day of work, organizing the kitchen in the way that works best for you." It was impossible not to notice how Curry consistently transformed every gesture of generosity into an opportunity for Sarah to maintain her dignity. He wasn't giving food to a needy family. He was providing supplies for his new employee. Sarah spent the next 2 hours organizing the guest house, putting clothes in closets, establishing routines for the children. For the first time in months, Emma and Diego played without worry, their voices echoing through the house with a joy that Sarah had feared she would never hear again. "Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise," she murmured to herself while folding clothes. "And today, we really rose." How is it possible that immediate physical security frees up so much mental space to process emotional traumas? Sarah discovered that, for the first time since losing her job, she could think beyond basic survival. At 8 o'clock at night, after Emma and Diego were bathed and in new pajamas that Curry had mysteriously provided, "Isha keeps extra clothes for visiting children," he explained casually. Sarah was putting the children to bed in the first safe bed they had had in weeks. "Mommy," Diego said, hugging his worn teddy bear, "can we stay here forever?" The innocent question broke Sarah's heart. "Not forever, love, but long enough for Mommy to find a good job and an apartment of our own." "But I like it here," Diego insisted. "Mr. Steph is nice, and I'm not worried anymore." Emma, always more perceptive, asked a question that revealed her devastating maturity. "Mommy, if you get a job, are we going to have to leave Mr. Steph alone?" Naturally, this brings us to the moment when Sarah realized that her children weren't just being helped. They were forming emotional bonds that would complicate future transitions. "Emma, dear, Mr. Steph has his own family, wife and daughters. We are just temporary visitors." "But he seems lonely," Emma observed, with the frightening intuition of children. When he smiles, his eyes get sad sometimes. Sarah was surprised by her daughter's perception. She had noticed the same thing, a subtle melancholy behind Curry's kindness that suggested he was also receiving something from this connection. After the IBE, children fell asleep. Sarah went out to the guest house porch and found Curry sitting on the main porch, looking at the stars with a thoughtful expression. "Excuse me," she called softly. "May I thank you properly?" Curry smiled and waved for her to join him. "How are they adapting?" "Like fish in water," Sarah laughed, sitting in the chair beside him. "Diego asked if we can stay forever, and Emma is worried about leaving you alone when we go." "Smart children," Curry observed. "Emma reminds me of my own daughters, very perceptive, always trying to take care of everyone." What's most impressive is how deep connections can form quickly when they're based on mutual vulnerability and genuine need. Sarah and Curry were discovering they had more in common than their very different circumstances suggested. "Steph," Sarah said, choosing words carefully, "may I ask why you really did this? And don't tell me just about your mother. There's something more, isn't there?" Curry was quiet for a long moment, clearly debating internally about how much honesty to share. "Do you want the complete truth?" he asked finally. "I always prefer the truth." "I have everything anyone could want," Curry began, his voice carrying a melancholy that Sarah had occasionally noticed. "Incredible career, loving family, financial security, public respect. But sometimes I feel disconnected from why any of it matters." Sarah listened in silence, realizing she was witnessing a vulnerability that Curry rarely shared. Constantly traveling, living in a bubble of privilege, being surrounded by people who treat me like a product instead of a person. "It can be isolating," he continued. "And today, when I stopped the car and saw you fighting for your family with so much love and determination, I remembered why I started playing basketball." "Why did you start?" Sarah asked softly. "To give hope to people like my mother. To show that difficult circumstances don't determine final destinies. To be an example that it's possible to rise." How many times do successful people lose connection with the values that originally motivated them? Curry was admitting exactly that disconnection, and Sarah was offering a bridge back to his fundamental purposes. "So when you let me help your family," Curry concluded, "you helped me too. You reminded me why my platform matters, why privilege is responsibility." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "Steph, you saved our lives today. You literally saved us." "Sarah, you saved something in me too. You reminded me that true strength doesn't come from titles or money. It comes from love, determination, and willingness to rise no matter how many times you fall." It was possible to feel that something deep was solidifying between them. Not romance, but a human connection based on mutual recognition of strength, vulnerability, and shared purpose. "Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise." Sarah repeated the words that had become their shared mantra. "Exactly," Curry smiled. "And sometimes we rise better when we have someone to help us. And sometimes helping others helps us to rise too." Sarah looked through the guest house window, where Emma and Diego slept deeply for the first time in weeks, without worry or fear. Then she looked at Curry, who seemed more at peace with himself than when she had met him a few hours before. "Steph," she said, "I have the feeling this isn't going to be an ordinary, temporary arrangement." How so? Emma was right. You were lonely. And we needed more than a house. We needed extended family. Someone who believed in us. Curry nodded slowly. And I needed to remember that my life has purpose beyond three-point shots. So maybe, Sarah suggested with a smile, this arrangement is beneficial for everyone involved in ways we didn't anticipate. Maybe it is, Curry agreed. Maybe God put you on that sidewalk today, not just so I could help you, but so you could help me remember who I really am. Sarah extended her hand and shook Curry's hand, not as an employee thanking her boss, but as two adults who had found unexpected connection in a moment of mutual need. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing strength where I only saw failure." "Thank you," he replied, "for showing me that true strength has nothing to do with fame or money." They sat in comfortable silence, two strangers who had become extended family in a single day, watching the stars and contemplating how a casual encounter had transformed multiple lives. And it was then that the truth finally came to light. 1 year and 3 months after that casual encounter on 14th Street, Sarah Martinez was cutting the red ribbon at the entrance of the Martinez-Curry Community Clinic, a medical center that offered free care for low-income families in Oakland. Beside her, Steph Curry held a golden plaque with the words, "Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise together." The journey to that moment had been extraordinary in ways none of them could have anticipated. To understand how a 3-minute encounter on the sidewalk transformed into a partnership that would change thousands of lives, we need to follow the evolution of a relationship that redefined family, purpose, and the true meaning of success. Have you ever seen how some people enter our lives exactly when we need them? As if the universe had conspired to create transformative connections? Sarah and Steph had discovered that their encounter wasn't coincidence. It was mutual need disguised as casualty. 6 weeks after moving into the guest house, Sarah had gotten a job as head nurse at Children's Hospital Oakland, thanks to the connections Curry had made. But instead of moving immediately, she had proposed something unexpected. "Steph," she said, during one of the nightly porch conversations that had become ritual, "what if this arrangement wasn't temporary?" "What do you mean?" "Emma and Diego have never been so happy. You said you feel less isolated. Isha mentioned that the girls love having younger siblings around when you're home. And I never had a real extended family." It was impossible not to notice that what had begun as an emergency solution had evolved into something much deeper and more lasting. Ashley Williams, director of the hospital that hired Sarah, had been impressed not just with her medical skills, but with her natural leadership and extraordinary compassion. "Sarah," Ashley said during the 6-month evaluation, "I've never seen anyone connect with families in crisis like you do. It's as if you understand exactly what they're going through." "I do understand," Sarah replied simply. "I've been there. How is it possible that traumatic experiences transform into empathy superpowers?" Sarah was discovering that her own journey through despair had equipped her to help others in ways that formal education never could teach. Marcus Williams, the lawyer that Curry had connected with Sarah for legal matters, had observed both their transformations over the months. "Steph," he said during a golf game, "you seem different since Sarah and the children entered your life. More connected, more yourself." "They reminded me of who I really am," Curry replied. "And more importantly, they showed me how to use what I have in ways that really matter." Naturally, this brings us to the moment when Sarah proposed the idea that would change their lives and impact the entire Oakland community. "Steph," Sarah said one night, holding architectural plans she had been secretly drawing for weeks, I have a crazy idea. I'm listening. What if we created a community clinic? A place where families like I was can receive quality medical care without worrying about payment? Where nurses and doctors who understand struggle can treat patients with dignity? Curry studied the detailed drawings, impressed with the meticulous planning. Sarah, this is incredible, but it would be a huge investment. I know, and I know it would be asking a lot. But think about the impact. How many families are facing impossible choices between health and housing? How many children don't receive care because parents are ashamed they can't pay? What's most impressive is how personal experience of trauma can transform into systematic vision to solve similar problems for others. Sarah was proposing not just a clinic, but a revolution in how medical care is offered to vulnerable communities. Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise, Curry murmured, looking at the plans. And if we rise together, we can lift others too. Exactly. Let's do it. The construction of the clinic took 8 months. During that time, Emma and Diego had completely integrated into the extended Curry family. Emma attended the same school as Ryan and Riley, and Diego had become inseparable from Riley, only 2 years older. "Uncle, Steph," Diego said one morning during breakfast at the main house. Shared meals had become tradition. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor, like Mommy, and play basketball like you." "You can be anything you want, Diego," Curry replied, messing up the boy's curly hair. "But always remember to use your talents to help others." Emma, now 8 years old, but still with the wisdom of someone much older, watched the family interactions with deep satisfaction. "Mommy," she said to Sarah later, "you don't look sad in your eyes anymore." "What do you mean, dear?" "Before, even when you smiled, your eyes were sad. Now, your eyes smile too." How many times do children articulate profound truths with devastating simplicity? Emma had perfectly captured the transformation that everyone had witnessed in Sarah. The clinic's inauguration was a community event that attracted hundreds of families. Sarah, now medical director, had recruited a staff of doctors and nurses who shared her philosophy of compassionate care. "This clinic," Sarah said in her inaugural speech, "was born from a simple truth, that every family deserves access to quality medical care, regardless of financial circumstances. But more than that, every person deserves to be treated with dignity during vulnerable moments." Curry watched from the side, holding Diego on his lap while Emma held his free hand. Isha was on the other side with Ryan and Riley, the entire extended family united to celebrate something they had built together. "Strength is not measured by what we carry," Sarah continued her speech, "but by how we rise. And when we rise together, we can lift entire communities." It was possible to feel that the moment transcended a clinic inauguration. It was a celebration of how authentic human connections can create changes that echo far beyond individual lives. 6 months after opening, the clinic had served more than 2,000 families. Sarah had become a respected voice in healthcare reform, frequently invited to speak about community care models. "Dr. Martinez," a reporter asked during a public health conference, "what was the inspiration for this innovative care model?" "The inspiration," Sarah smiled, "came from understanding that true healing happens when we treat not just symptoms, but whole people. When we see dignity instead of charity, strength instead of weakness." Curry, watching the interview from home, felt deep pride not just for Sarah's accomplishments, but for the shared journey that had brought them there. "Daddy," Riley asked, climbing into his lap during the interview, "was Aunt Sarah always a famous doctor?" "No, Princess. Aunt Sarah became famous because she never forgot what it's like to need help, and that made her better at helping others. 2 years after that sidewalk encounter, Sarah received national recognition for innovation in community care. During her acceptance speech, she made sure to credit not just Steph Curry, but the entire extended family she had created. Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise, she concluded her speech. But the most important lesson I learned is that nobody rises alone. Everyone needs someone who believes in them when they can't believe in themselves. Emma, now 10 years old, watched with absolute pride while Diego, at 7, whispered to Riley, "My mommy is incredible." "Our mommy," Riley automatically corrected, and Diego smiled with satisfaction. Steph Curry had stopped his car to help a single mother crying on the street. What he discovered was that sometimes saving someone means being saved too. Sarah had found not just financial stability and housing security, but family, purpose, and a platform to multiply her own healing. Strength is not measured by what we carry, but by how we rise together. Had become more than an inspirational phrase. It had become a life philosophy that would continue impacting generations, one extended family at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that's the true definition of success. Not what we conquer for ourselves, but how many lives we manage to lift along with our own.